And
now we will talk about experience in 3 farms. We will talk more about the trials. Our discussion is about these trials. So now we will have this discussion on the stage. So we had three farmers from 3 different areas of Latvia taking part in this trial. We will get to know what kind of thing is intermediate crop. Probably all of you know what it is. So in Latvian we mean it. So we use the crops that we sow between the two crops. So the functions are the covering crops. So this year, 3 farms in Latvia cooperated with eAgronoms, made these trials and used different mixes. And there were seeds from different companies, and in some areas and some fields there are some trials their own mixes were used, and we will be able to see what the results depended on. So now we will talk with Martin Stanke from Sillaci, from Dienvidkurzeme, from the western part of Latvia. Now we have Gundars Kalve from farm Kalves, from Jēkabpils novads, the famous Gundars Kalve, and Martin Flaksis from Dunalka. So I'd like to remind you that you can use menti.com to comment and to ask questions. And the code is 15622-731. If you are in menti.com, you can enter your question or comment in the box. So now we have the first question about this topic. So your experience for using the intermediate crop.
So how far have you used these crops? What motivated you? Why is it good? Why do we need to do that? And how does it fit your general practice? What is the role and relevance? Martin, thank you for giving me the floor. We have quite a small farm, but we still have to be active and continue working, and we have to be like earthworms to move forward. And with these crops, we have approximately 6 years of experience. We first sowed with tillers, and everyone was happy. For game animals were happy, and others were happy. And the next year, the results were not as good. So there are good results, there are bad results, or worse results, and there is a different experience. And we can compare these experiences. But in any case, I really like the idea that maybe a quarter, 3-4 months, this land produces something, the soil produces something, there is vegetation. And you don't need to use any additional synthetic inputs, and you don't need to do anything, and you still contribute to the soil being active itself, cleaning itself from the plant protection products and the residues. And everything actually happens by itself. This is my approach, this is my thinking, that in autumn you have a blooming field, and it's nice to look at. How did you end up having this approach? Why did you think that this idea was good? I followed mostly what takes place in other countries, more or less, because 5 years ago we had the average practice that you actually plowed in autumn, plow in autumn, and work traditionally, and that's it. And this slow wave that moves along with the green deal, it actually makes you think that maybe you can do something cheaper. And of course, I also didn't want to spend unnecessary hours in the tractor. Just do everything quickly and let the nature do its job, and then see what the results are. But these results vary on an annual basis, and not always our plans are the same as the reality. Gundars and Mārtiņš, maybe you want to add something? Don't be shy. We sowed these crops for the first year this year, and several factors affected our decision. First, childhood memories. Grandmothers told us that the best pumpkins and squash grow in the compost pile. And if you want good results, then maybe you can use some of the compost. And second, we are quite green in our thinking, in our family, though we are conventional farmers, but we are, in our thinking, we are green, and our aquaculture section is almost organic. So we can still work on commercial basis, but still be nature friendly. And also, we have to look at financial aspects. When we looked at 2022 results, we noticed that on the average, we lost 470 euros per hectare, which was quite a lot. We understood that we have to think of something to replace the expensive chemical fertilizers with something green, something that we understand, and that is cheaper. So that solves the fertilizer cost. So this is the first year. So I cannot claim that this will happen, but we really hope that this will happen, and maybe it's beginner's luck. Because this year our crops that we used for these purposes were very good, very healthy. So we hope that the next year we'll be able to reduce the fertilizer costs. So we basically tried because you were offered an opportunity to participate in this test. Yes, and also thanks to the fact that my daughter works in eAgronom. So the initiative came from her. So let us say thank you to her. And also, I have personally seen how the generation of farmers has changed. Because usually the farms were started by agronomists or former heads of kolkhoz and so on. But I came from an area close to Riga at the age of 21 and didn't have any education. And I have worked in agriculture for several decades, and I can compare. During the first years, the biggest problem was my lack of knowledge and also the lack of land resources, and now we have quite a lot of land. And what concerns machinery, we actually had a horse that worked for us as a machine. But now these are the challenges that we no longer face, and we have different challenges. And currently, I have the same unclear feeling in our agriculture as I had in 1991. Those the challenges are quite different. We have an absurd environment, absurd statutory requirements, and I slowly try to get up from this unfavorable situations that we faced and return to profitability. Martins, maybe you can tell about your current experience and maybe there were some favorite mixtures. My experience is much longer. The first time we did this experiment in 2017, and you remember this year when you actually could swim in your fields. There was a lot of rain and water. Then there was 2018. During the winter, I reassessed what I did right and what I did wrong. And then the next year we sowed these crops in 120 crops, 120 hectares, and the drought in 2018 just confirmed my convictions that we have to do this. And then, of course, the generations changed in the farm. And my father actually said that we should use more of these crops, that we should use these crops in all the fields and not just in some of the fields. And then there was COVID time, and I was quite sure. And we had already tested our fields and also together with the agronoms, and I already knew what we are doing, how it will affect my soils, and that this is like a perpetual mobile, that you cannot stop 1 year and that you cannot achieve mega changes just during 1 year. You have to be persistent on an annual basis, and you have to cover all the plots and all the fields and so on to eventually achieve this ultimate target of having healthy soils. And of late, it has almost become a routine. So we don't have stubs, we have only fields that have been sowed, or we have harvested fields. Of course, we have saved a lot what concerns cultivation costs, but then there are also other things like seed costs, management of straw. So I always look at the risks, and I always try to do cheaper, and sometimes maybe we lose 5%, but otherwise we are quite okay. I choose a cheap but safe way to ensure that I have the result, not to lose my competitive power with regards to my neighbors, because this always clearly demonstrates that I have to do something wrong if I am losing the competitive it's a competitive war with my neighbors. And what concerns mixtures, I was very happy that my fields were there, and we could demonstrate how it is possible. What are the other ways of sowing on time and with better results? You have all chosen quite identical mixtures. Maybe you have some favorites. And what is your opinion about the mixtures available in the market currently? Of course, my mixture, mustard, which is very tall with yellow blooms. But what concerns testing mixtures, my favorite was a Ludea mixture that attracted nitrogen. So basically, the more you sow, the less risk you have that you will lose something due to uneven distribution. So this mixture also produces quite a lot of biomass, and it's also nice to look at. And I also liked Martins mixtures, which were quite good. But there was one mixture that included clover. And I don't know why these particular species didn't grow well in my fields. Populanaceous plants. But otherwise, Martins mixtures were great. For example, nitrogen seeds, they were quite good, in particular considering the fact that they were grown here. And also Lithuanian mixtures were quite nice. Mārtiņš, maybe you can explain. You have to look at slugs. Maybe that could have influenced the result. And also my comment is that we have tested various things in our farm, and in particular if you do that for the first, second or even fourth year, namely until you have completed 2 cycles with these crops, maybe this composition is not so important that you have 9 ingredients or whatever. Our tests demonstrated that the main thing is to grow biomass because it contains various microelements. Because if this crop is small and there is no biomass, then there is no effect. The plants are small. You need something that grows quickly, that you can build this biomass, and you have to sow on time. You mentioned the mustard, so for you it's important how the field looks like. Yes, of course. Then you see various animals like foxes and does, and we have green Europe. We have to strive for that. We have to be happy with our nature, and we are the greenest country in the world. If you agree, then you need to applaud. Gundar. What about these mixtures? I understand that you use customized mixtures as well. What was the principle behind this? We sowed on 2 different periods of time. The first fields were sowed on the 26th of July, and the second sowing was on the 14th of August, so 20 days in between these sowing sessions. And I can say that in July, those that were sowed in July could be worked into the soil even before the late sowing of winter wheat, because the biomass was really large and has reached maturity just before the sowing for the winter wheat. Well, the other fields actually reached maturity at the beginning of November when we had when we were approaching our seminar, and the biomass was really large. And agronomists who participated during these visit days said that they wanted to see the soil test results, and we were asked whether we used additional nitrogen, and the answer is no, we didn't. But this field was selected so that it is closer to the potential visitation place where approximately 50 people would come. And before that we had winter rape there that actually died. And in spring we had to sow the summer rape. And after these 2 rape crops, this field was quite well cultivated, and also the remaining rape seeds were like 1 additional ingredient in the mixture, so the density was quite large. And I also agree with Mārtiņš that visual appearance is very important, and the mustard makes this appearance pleasant. But actually all the crops were very nice visually, but in any case it's clear that we also enjoy the world visually. As someone coming from the city, I am quite shocked by your romantic approach to these very rational things. Anything else that you would like to add what concerns mixtures? A short comment. The rape was mentioned, and also mustard. Do not sow mixtures with mustard after rape or with winter rape, and actually forget about mustard in general, because these plants actually propagate by themselves, and the remaining rape seeds are a problem. And this was one of my basic principles, that these crops should not contribute to problems. Mustard, if you are not sure, just give it up. Yes, of course it grows quickly and everything is nice, but you have to avoid as much as possible because there could be some root diseases that could later affect the rape that you could sow in these fields. Thank you for your comment. And now about the machinery, about the seed material. Seed material, of course, is important, but what kind of machinery did you use, and what would you say about positive, negative aspects about your choice? In my case, I had quite different plans, but the reality was quite different because my machinery was not ready for the sowing. So I have to say thank you to Dojus that actually spared a day and came to my fields and helped me with sowing. Our equipment is leased, and I didn't know all the peculiarities at that time of this machinery, but we tried to proceed. And maybe the field wasn't as even as I had wanted. And I assume that maybe we sowed, maybe the sowing depth was not as deep as we would have wanted. But the result is satisfactory, and I'm happy. Maybe in a bit more than 10 days, I could sow the remaining fields myself, and they are used cultivator seeder that had these arms at the end. So it's basically did 3 strings, even down the soil. That we quite often damage by driving over it. Also, this machinery removes living roots and also sows the seed. And just in a few days that you can use the rollers to compact the field, and then the field is ready for the sowing during the next year. It's even and it's easily used. We use the biodrill sower and cultivator, and I'm very happy with the result for the first year. What about efficiency? If you compare with sowing crops efficiency, I don't know about other farms, how you measured it in hectares or in some other way, or biomass, for example. We had a 4-meter sower. It worked quite quickly, but since we had 7 various crops, we sowed a 20-meter wide slot. Then we cleaned the sower, added new seeds, weighed the seeds to ensure that we meet the recommended specifications. So it wasn't quickly, but if you use just 1 crop, then I think the efficiency would increase. Would this experience affect the sowing of basic crops or primary crops? Not really, I think. What would you do differently next year? Considering the experience of the first year and considering what all the agronomists that came to us said, they had more experience than me. And so I have a lot of experience. I still feel that I need an agronomist. But these agronomists were happy with the results, so probably we would not change much.
Nu, tad piesprādzēties, es kā vienmēr daru muļķības. 2018. gadā, kā to sākām, jau te 17.
We started in 2017. I just mixed 2 crops. 10 days before sowing, we used the fertilizer spreader, and I mixed the wedge.
eAgronom izmēģinājām, mēs sējām 16. augustā ar sēmašīnu,
and black radish. And we sowed on the 16th of August, and we also left one field for small seeds like Fassilia that would not fly away for more than 30 meters. And I have one old 9-meter sower that we can use for a day to sow 60 hectares per day. So my approach is to do it as cheap as possible. So one day is for spreading and then one day for sowing, and so we cover 120 hectares. Why would you say that others would be skeptical? Because they try and they don't succeed, and sometimes they succeed, and also I also lose maybe 10% on average basis. And last year in particular I saw these patchy areas. But on the other hand, I say that it was so cheap that I can afford, considering the sowing technique. So currently we are more thinking, more about drones and then smaller seeds and so on. Maybe that could pay off in the future. We could use that.
I'd like to remind you about menti.com, where you can ask your questions or comments, write your comments. Here you can see the code on the top of the screen. Maybe you can also share your experience. About evaluation about the areas you've sown. So those people who consider using intermediate crops, what would you suggest? How do you think, is it a good outcome you received, or something you would improve? So if it's a neighbor, just don't tell them anything. Just better they don't change anything in their approach. I don't tell your neighbors. They don't need to know this, how good it is. But actually, there are so different farmers and different opinions. Of course, you have to think before you start working to understand what you're doing, but just dive into this trial. In case you use this trial, you have to plan everything, but you have to use it for a bigger field, so you can use and feel this excitement. Do you have your neighbor here? Yes, I think I have my neighbor here in the audience. Gundars, I think it's important to do some tests to understand and to evaluate what is the benefit of this intermediate crop, but it could be measured only during 10 years, because as Martin mentioned, it's not a short-term outcome. You can see, only after testing in a longer period you can see the benefits of it. And also the thing is that if the less we move and rotate the land, the soil, the more you can see there are better results. You can also see that all these nutrients actually live in their own levels. In one way it's good, because the soil has more potassium and nitrogen for the seeds. But there are also some disadvantages, that the seeds do not want to make longer, deeper roots. They stay in this upper level only. About this intermediate crops, I think that this helps us to implement more biological or organic approaches. So if we sow these intermediate crops, we actually do the same thing then we would use artificial fertilizers. So there are different earthworms. Some of them live just in the first level, then those who live a bit deeper, but then there are earthworms who actually live in a meter depth of the soil. So if we compare to plowing, of course we can plow and work it in the old way. But the most interesting thing is that if we sow this intermediate crop, so we don't move the soil, we don't do anything to there. We don't know what result will be in the spring. So what do you do with the intermediate crop in the spring? So as to what I do, I just use that direct drill, but sometimes I haven't been too patient, and it's been too much moisture. And sometimes if it's too wet, the soil is too wet, then it gets compacted a bit more than it should be. If the spring is very wet, it could be so we could maybe move these stems of the intermediate crop, and so they get dried. But actually you have to see in every spring, because they're so different. So sometimes during the winter the intermediate crops just freeze over, and in the spring I can just see I have seeders, whether tile or the disc ones. I go over them. I wait when the soil is not that wet anymore. In my farm, we just roll the stems, but I have one of our agronomists suggested that so you have the solar panels on your roof, so the solar panels do the best during the summer, but here while in winter and in autumn and in winter they don't yield that much, but you don't remove them, right? So this is almost the same, so it's better not to move them. The intermediate crops just stay on the field, but we will be able to evaluate and to see which fields did better, those where we rolled over when the seeds were put in the ground. So idea is, so we were doing some tests, and we have seen a lot of videos. So during the first days of frost in England and in Germany, they just stop growing. But here in Latvia we have winters, so this is a natural process. Then they just freeze over, and it shouldn't be done here. It's not needed, necessary. But if we roll over, we can see that if the spring is wet, it keeps more moisture in the soil. But of course it depends. So we checked it in 2018. We rolled over, but we haven't done it afterwards. So what about tests? Have you ever extracted enough NPK? And what about the next year? So about the chemicals, we did our first tests in 2020. If there is a good intermediate crop, so there is 80 kilograms of nitrogen, and potassium is not that much. So we did in 2023. And the second and third time, actually, we checked other chemicals also, but they're not very much. So most of people are interested in nitrogen and potassium and phosphorus. Of course, about the nitrogen, if it's legumes, then it's attracted from the air. But as I've asked agronomists, if I have 80 kilograms in my biomass of the intermediate, how do I calculate for the next year for the barley and wheat? So actually, we calculate this in our farm. So we reduce additional nitrogen for the basic crops, but the yields are the same. Yes, it's possible. This is only we have to check during the practice. Oh, I have a lot of questions, but I think we have to manage to get some lunch. So the closing question or comment, actually during the lunch, you should ask everyone, you can ask questions to this, our specialist. Thank you for being so adventurous to check and to try new methods, but what are the things that disturb your efficiency of your farm? So the limiting factors, of course, this is this area, what you have and how efficient you are in working with it, and also in the management. Of course, there are so many factors that impact. I think we have to take into account that climate changes are real and we really feel them, temperature fluctuation and different seasons that have been moved. So we have to live with that. This is one of the limiting factors, and this is the thing that we can't impact anyhow. So what would be call to action or suggestion? In my case, I know that this is the first year I try this intermediate crop, but we will definitely use it next year. We will check it and try it in more areas and more hectares. And I hope that this will help us in the future. I also would like to add that for intermediate crops, it's very interesting that we have winter rape allowed in the intermediate crop, and I also checked it. I saw it. Of course. So, of course, there are some limits. So we can't apply for. And so other crops freeze over, but rape could grow, and in the spring we still had the rape, but after the rain it just died. So it's quite risky. So we have to understand which intermediate crop should be sown, so we would reduce our risks. There is also an option to, if the intermediate crop is sown in mid-July, so after 5 weeks after, in between the two crops, so there in the same field, you can use something in between these sowing times. In my farm, we don't grow rape. We companion crop as rape. I think we were quite successful with that. The first year, it happened so, but the second year, it was our idea to do that. As to efficiency, we are thinking of efficiency in two ways. So about these intermediate crops, we use also compost. There is a small add to it because we are buying compost from him. I understand that theoretically it's manure I should be using. Of course, I'm not some farmer who is growing beef and using the manure there, but I can buy compost. I think that we should not have more hectares of our land, but we have to diversify our and to add more value to this 1 hectare. I think we should work more efficiently. So ask him about to add whether is he using compost. Yes. And so it's not a question about the winters, but actually we have to be flexible to the new situation. Thank you, Martin Stalve, Gundars, Kalve, and Martin Flaksis. Thank you, guys.